Good morning. My name is Sarah Kiesling, a member of the Eco-Justice Ministry team here at Westminster. Today, eco-justice and adult education are coming together to kick off a series on environmental justice in celebration of the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, which was yesterday, April 22nd. In offering this forum, we are building on two concurrent themes. Social justice has been working all year on investing in each other's future, hoping to better understand the structures and systems that have failed many of our neighbors and to explore ways we can work together to build better outcomes. Adult education this spring has been exploring the theme of disowning theology, examining some of the damage that theological distortions can do in the world. We can look at the theology of environmental justice under both of these lenses, disowning a theology of dominion that views the planet as a subordinate resource for humans to distort, and taking up a theology of care for creation, in which our role is to respect, to partner, and to tend. Today, our speaker is Patricia Torres. Many of you may recognize her as a Minnesota state senator and the first Latina elected to the state Senate in 2006. She is recognized both locally and nationally for her contributions in eliminating disparities and opening opportunities for women, low-income people, and minorities. Last year, Senator Torres stepped down from her Senate seat to assist people in developing public policy strategies centered around the needs and assets of Indigenous communities, people of color, and low-income communities. She serves as a consultant for the Faith and Indigenous legislative platform that Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light launched in coalition with Honor the Earth, the Minnesota Council of Churches, MN 350, Minnesota Environmental Justice Table, Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate, and other organizations. Before we get started, just a couple of items. After Patricia Torres' talk, there will be a Q&A. For those attending in person, raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone to you so all, including those on the live stream, can hear your question or comment. For those attending on the live stream, please submit your comment or question in the chat and we'll monitor that and raise your questions and or comment. Please join me in welcoming Patricia Torres.
Good morning. Such a pleasure to be with you this morning. Thank you for the invitation. I was reading before I came here about the governance of the Presbyterian Church. And I was very impressed. And I felt like I needed to know more because as I read about the teaching of the younger generations and the responsibility of the elders to pass on the responsibility for the collective, I felt that it was absolutely imperative for me that I go back to the legislature and find out if we have a Presbyterian at the Senate or the House, because we really need them. We need you. We need them to know about this teaching, the responsibility of the collective and the responsibility that we have as elders to teach the young generation about what it means to do things for others, about taking care of our community, taking care of our planet. I grew up Catholic, and the governance in the Catholic Church may be similar in some ways, but I don't remember this teaching. But I would like to share with you a few things about my upbringing, because as I read about you and the responsibility towards young people and what happened to me as a young person when I moved to this country, I had an opportunity to reflect a lot about things that I am doing today that were not planned of my life. I didn't plan that. I didn't plan when I was a young person. My parents didn't have this plan for me. As my elders and my aunts and the people in my life, I don't believe that they had a plan to have me living as an immigrant in a country far away. I was the first one who left my family, and now there are 3 of us who don't live in our country. But I want to share this with you because sometimes we're called to do things that were not part of our plan, but they become so significant in our lives and in the lives of others. So we might not be in the place, in the church, in the school, in the community that told us that we have to do this work, but yet we end up doing that work. So as I was introduced, I became a senator about 17 years ago after moving to this country 35 years ago. I got married with a student who went to Colombia in an exchange program. He was in the program of anthropology at the University of Minnesota. I fell in love with this guy, and in 8 months we got married, and here I am. We have been married now for 36 years. And I grew up in a family of 8 siblings. There were 3 sisters and me and 4 brothers. And my mother grew up in a family of 9 siblings. And there were 6 women in her family. And she was the only one who actually had children. 3 of them didn't get married. And it was absolutely important in our community, in my family. Prayer was very important in our life, and we always asked my mother for prayer from our aunties, from las tías, when we needed something. And so when you were in need, you always called my mother and say, please tell the aunties that they need to pray because I really need to get this job, or I need to get this money for this down payment for this house. And everybody did that. And it's interesting because many times we didn't get what they prayed for, but we thought that their prayer gave us exactly what we needed anyway. We were convinced that their prayers made miracles for us, even though most, I guess 9 out of 10 times, we really didn't get what we were praying for. But I grew up with role models, with women who were very strong in my life. I also went to a Catholic school from kindergarten to my graduation. So discipline and doing what was the right thing in my life and for others was very important in my life as a good Catholic. I am here today with a woman that I admire, Betty Follier, who has been working on women's issues for so long. And I realize how important women have been in my life, not only teaching me about the importance of the common good, but also understanding this responsibility that I talked about. So in my life, I made decisions that were really, when I came here when I was 23 years ago, that was really my own decision. I fell in love with this guy. I left home. My family, it's not that they disapproved, but they were afraid of the step that I was taking, that I was moving so far away. And when I arrived to Minneapolis, we were living in Prospect Park, near the university. It was a very difficult time for me. I was 23. I arrived here really in the summer. And then, on October 31st, everybody disappeared. It was like the next day was the day of Los Muertos, and everybody was gone. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand what was going on. And, the cold was one thing, but to really be in a place where people literally disappear from the streets and their gardens and their homes was very odd to me. I started thinking, where do they go? Why is that there is no one outside? Well, later I understood that is kind of the day that you clean your garden, farmers, end the harvest, and then you go inside to really think about all of these recipes for Thanksgiving, which is so wonderful. I love that now, but then it was tough. I didn't know. So that was a very difficult time for me, very depressing actually, because not only people disappear in the streets, but it was a time of thinking about family, thinking about home, thinking about the things that I no longer had with me. And so I got very depressed. And, when I got here, I couldn't speak English, so the job that I had was really cleaning bottles in a company. And for me, it was easy to think about this job because I didn't have to speak. So I quickly moved into finding a job where I really didn't have to speak. And this bottle company was just perfect. It was a shift that I had to work on from 3 to 11 p.m., so that way I could go to school during the day and learn to speak English. And what was very hard, though, was that my isolation and my desire to speak with people and my need to really learn the language got farther and farther away because I couldn't. I didn't have to speak. I didn't have to relate to people. But thank goodness I was able to go to school. And at that time, Minnesota really was investing in the growth and the education of immigrant people in profound ways. So I was able to find school very near my house. And I went to school every single day. 7 in the morning, classes were open all day, and you can go and, move along, learning English and learning about, being in this state, learning about Thanksgiving and the recipes and all of those wonderful things that you have to learn about living in Minnesota and thriving. That was fundamental for me. It was so important. So this environment that I was in, that I didn't recognize, that I didn't know about, became a very good place for me, a place that I began to love and admire and really take advantage of. Then obviously my husband went back to the university, going to the Walter Library and just seeing this amazing building that I could go to for free and get any book I wanted and study there was just really a gift for me. So I took full advantage of it. In that time in my life, I met this Puerto Rican woman in the church across the street from my house. Her name was Carmen Robles. And Carmen Robles spotted me in the audience. It was an audience like this, and I think there was the only two of us were the only Latinas in this audience. And she spotted me, she called me, she went to talk to me after the service, and she said, "So you're not from here?" She spoke Spanish, and it was like, wow, I found somebody that I just really can talk to. So she asked me about my background, and I told her, I went to law school in Colombia, and I got married with Jack, and here I am. I've been here for about a year, but, I work in this place. And she said, well, you need to work for the community. You have the background to do more than printing bottles in a company. You have to do more. You can give more, and you can get more if you really work with our community. That conversation, that day after church, transformed my life. When this woman told me that I can give more, when I thought that there was nothing for me to give to anybody in this country. that I had no skill, that I couldn't speak the language. I was a student that really didn't have a penny in my pocket. How can I give to a community? I never knew that I had something to give at that point. So she explained to me what I could give. She was working on child protection issues, and she explained to me how families in communities of color were struggling to keep their families together. And she explained to me the concept of child protection in this country, and I could not believe it. So she introduced me to a group of Black women and Native women who were at the time advocating for family preservation in Minnesota. Remember, this is 35 years ago. These Black women and Native American women were working incredibly hard to create an office to monitor how Hennepin County and other counties in the state of Minnesota were removing Black children and Native children from their families and placing them with families in suburban communities, and how there was a disproportionate report of Black families and Native families to the child protection system, and how families were being breaking apart. When I learned about this, I could not believe that a social worker could have the power of separating a family. It just didn't enter in my brain and in my soul that in a country like the United States, you had laws that actually dictated that in order to protect a child, you take that child away from a family. I became very intrigued about that policy, and I made a decision that I was going to learn about it and I was going to work on that, because that could not happen in a country like the United States of America. So 35 years ago, I made the decision that that was what I was going to do, and I was going to follow these women wherever they went. And I was going to do whatever it took to understand what was happening in Minnesota and what was happening with these disparities that they talked about and the poverty that people of color were facing in the state of Minnesota. This state that I came to admire on TV, because remember, really what you see in Latin America is the best of you. All of these programs that show the most beautiful, affluent people. That was what was in my brain. That's what I came to see here. And this is what I aspired, that one day I could have this beautiful home that I saw on TV, because it was possible. But these women told me that I was a Latina, and I didn't know that. I had no idea that I was Latina. And they taught me the construct of race and how I was part of an ethnic group in here that was a minority, and that then I was a woman in this ethnic group. And that was an issue that I really needed to understand. Well, I had no idea. So these women, these elders, took the responsibility to teach me these lessons. I was 24. I am going to turn 60. I have been living a life that is based on these teachings ever since. And part of the challenge that I see today, I would love to talk more about what happened throughout my life, but I wanted to talk about these beginnings because here with you today, this message about really understanding how you can influence the life of a young person, the life of a person really, forever. I am an example of that. And Carmen Robles, I don't think planned that day. I don't think it was her plan to come and find me in that church. But she did, and she did her job, and she transformed my life. this was my introduction to this country, but it was a good introduction because it set, my life in a path of seeking not only opportunities to get something here, but again, to give. When I think about my journey and the lessons that I have lived here, and what I had to learn about what Black families face today and Indigenous families face today, and their history, and how that connects to the work that I am doing now and that I began to do about 15 years ago in immigration. I think about the separation of families in the border. And that becomes a very personal thing for me, of course. Some of you may know I ran for Congress about a few years ago, and I was arrested because I was protesting with a group of people outside of a company that is based here in Minnesota, in Bloomington, that is called General Dynamics. And they do the technology and fabricate some of the cages where the children in the border were placed. And you have seen that probably on TV, and many of you have probably visited the border and see these children in these cages. Those cages are fabricated here in Minnesota. So I was protesting with a group of people and protesting the contracts, the federal contracts that pay for those cages to these companies. And I was arrested. And I was given the opportunity to talk again about family separation and what I learned about these families that I work with about 30 years ago. This was the foundation for me to work on environmental justice, but also to kind of get this frustration and this knowledge, this realization of what my reality really was in this country. That I was a Latina woman, that I really could aspire to do things, that I was doing some things, that I was obtaining education, but that there was so much to do here for people who looked like me. And that there were many people who could not actually go to the places where I was going. That they didn't have the access, perhaps, to this great university and these great libraries that were public because they didn't know they were there, that they were open for them, and that there were many other obstacles. I remember, and I realize now how these obstacles are so difficult to overcome. When I came here, libraries became so important to me, and understanding this concept of two cities was very interesting because I thought that St. Paul and Minneapolis were one city. I always thought it was one city until I got in a bus one day and I said I was going to the downtown library, and they said, yeah, get in, because somebody told me that I had to take the bus at University Avenue. So I got in the bus and I ended up in St. Paul. And there was a downtown library, and it was gorgeous. And I thought, this is actually not the library that I was just thinking that I was going to arrive to. Well, who knew? That was the downtown library in St. Paul, which is excellent, but I was coming to the downtown library in Minneapolis. People don't realize how traumatic that is, to find yourself in a different city, in a bus that you cannot really get back to your place. And I had to learn those lessons, and I really understood then and understand even more now some of the obstacles that we have to overcome to do these simple things, like, really trying to get in a bus and get transit. We are working so hard right now at the legislature to get funding, to increase funding for transit and transportation, and we need your help. We have gotten so used to just getting in our cars and getting to the places that we need to go, not understanding how many parents, how many workers, how many people actually have to take public transportation in order to really live their lives. It is an imperative. We need your help understanding that. And I want to take a pause here, and I want to ask you, if you ever had to take your children, your laundry in a couple of bags, get in a bus, and go to a laundromat, and do your laundry with a couple of kids, get in the bus, and get back to your home. Have you ever had to do that? You know, I had to do my laundry when I came to this country, but I didn't have my children with me. And I've done this exercise just to see who gets in the bus. Most of the women who get in the bus today are Latinas. Most of the women who get in the bus with this laundry are Black women. They have to get in the bus with their children to do laundry and get back home in the only day that they have free because they don't go to work. That will be today. Maybe yesterday or today. That's where they have to do this work. The only thing that they are asking us to do this very tough job, which takes basically all day long, is that we have transit and that we have buses so that they can do that. They're not asking for anything else. So I am asking you to help us ask for that at the legislature. I was able to get my education. I was able to complete my education at the University of Minnesota after living in Prospect Park in a very small place, learned to love that community. I got my degree in urban studies at the University of Minnesota and then went to the Humphrey Institute. I made a lot of progress in my life. I've gotten some very good jobs with the state of Minnesota. And in 2005, Tim Pawlenty ran again, and I was working for the state of Minnesota in the executive branch. And Tim Pawlenty cut so many programs for the poor, eliminated so many programs that help low-income people, low-income women, and immigrant people in this state that we have not been able to recover even after 16 years and all of the investments that we've made in these programs. Actually, it was Tim Pawlenty who eliminated health care for children of immigrants in this state, and who also eliminated driver's licenses for undocumented people that we just reestablished this year under the Walz administration. When that happened, I decided that it was time for me to leave the state of Minnesota. I really wanted to leave. I thought I was done with the state. I had done so much work, and one administration transformed everything I have fought for, and so many have fought for. And then my senator retired and announced that he was retiring. Wes Scoggin said, "I'm leaving." I was so frustrated and I was so ready to leave. I said to my husband, "I'm going to run for the Senate." And he looked at me and he said, "Are you serious?" I said, I'm darn serious. I'm running for the Senate. So he said, "Before you change your mind, I think we should go file." We got in the car and we went to file for office. When my neighbors and my professors at the Humphrey Institute learned that I was running for office, they got so excited. But then I began to learn about what I had done. I thought that was crazy. But I had already announced, and you can't go back. So I thought I have to talk to people that I knew, and I had to ask for help. And that's what I did. I began to talk to people, to my friends, to my neighbors, to my professors, everybody I knew. And that exercise was the most important exercise in my life. It was so important because then I learned that I had so many friends that would just not get in politics no matter what I said. And then there were other people that were so ready to work with me and become my best friends and help me in every way they could. And they helped me get elected. And I wish I could speak about my 16 years of work in the Minnesota Senate and the dozens of bills that I introduced in these 16 years, but I probably don't have the time. So I'm going to jump into the topic now that we're supposed to talk about, which is environmental justice. And I thought it was important to speak about my background because all of these elements that I described to you really prepare me for this day, for this work that I am doing now as a consultant. I couldn't possibly think about the opportunities and the privilege that I had in this country, getting my education and getting elected to the Minnesota Senate and now having my own company to lobby at the legislature, and not think about the people who influenced me and the people who gave me a hand when I needed it most, of the elders that really understood the importance of passing on the lessons to the young people to do the work that they need to do collectively. My work in environmental justice really began in the Senate when I was called by Ellen Anderson 15 years ago. She was the chair of the Environment Committee, and Ellen Anderson understood the importance of teaching young people the skill of taking care of the state of Minnesota. She understood the importance of being a leader who passed on the lessons of governance and working for the common good. So when I got elected, Ellen Anderson was responsible for figuring out how to distribute millions of dollars that were part of the legacy, the funding that came to from the legacy movement that you all work on to get increased funding for the arts and the environment. So we had a ton of money, just like we do today. And Ellen Anderson called the freshmen, the newly elected senators, and say, you're going to work with me on this, and I'm going to create subcommittees so that we can do the work collectively. And she assigned us to do this work in committee, and she made us chairs of these committees, which was unprecedented. In the Senate and in the House, a lot of the politics is about controlling power. So when you have a chair position that has a lot of money, they want to control the power. And they want to make sure that they have the control of the decision about this money and this policy. Well, Ellen Anderson decided differently. She decided that she had to have a group of people to make a decision, to make the best decision about how to distribute that money. Thanks to Ellen Anderson, I really became a good senator because she forced me to think very quickly, what it meant to be a senator and have that responsibility. So I became the chair of Parks and Trails. And I was given this funding that I had to figure out how to distribute for the state of Minnesota. It's interesting because in policy, you get these resources and then you don't get a map. It's just like, okay, so how do you distribute all of this funding for parks and trails? Where are the parks and trails and who needs money? I say, well, you have to figure it out, Madam Chair. It's like, okay. So you begin to figure it out in a logic way. You call the University of Minnesota and say, okay, do we have a map of parks and trails and do we know where is needed? And say, no, we don't. Do you have a map? Do you need a map, Senator? You have to give us money and we create a map. I say, okay, we'll do that. Let's figure this out. And then after you have all of these people who know these issues, then you have the people who come and disagree. no matter what you do. It really doesn't matter that you call them the experts of the University of Minnesota, the Department of Natural Resources, and you do your best and you work for months doing this, you will have the people who disagree. So I did an academic work, really guided by Ellen Anderson, and she agreed to do this thing because she saw the logic. And then people came from different counties and say, oh, we don't need these electronic maps that you're thinking about. We just need the money because, we just have these trails, they don't connect. We have these parks that are just falling apart, and we just need the money to repair that. So, well, I need to decide where. You all need it, so I need to figure out where is, the most need. So we engage in this discussion with a lot of people, but finally we came to consensus that we had to work collectively to repair and build parks and trails for all the state. That we had to invest in rural Minnesota, suburban Minnesota, and core metropolitan area, that we had to work collectively. That was 15 years ago. We did this work, we prevailed, we put a formula that everybody has been working with ever since. Those were my first lessons in the Minnesota Senate. And I practiced that really for 16 years until my caucus, the DFL caucus, lost the majority. And I'm going to tell you, I think this is a good place for me to talk about some painful decisions that you make in life. A couple of years ago, more than a couple of years ago, really, now, my district faced some of the most challenging times any district have faced. After the death of George Floyd, there was civil unrest in my district, and after he was killed in the corner of 38 and Chicago, which is in my district, many buildings were burned in my district. Along Lake Street, the 3rd Precinct building is in my district. Across the street was Gandhi Mahal, an Indian restaurant that belonged to one of my dearest friends. And then across the street was another small Japanese restaurant that belonged to very dear friends of mine, and I can go on. I experienced the most challenging time at that time, seeing the businesses of my closest friends in flames. So I went to the Senate, I went to the majority leader and many of our Republican friends, and I said, please visit my district. Please come and visit my district. And they came, they got a picture, and then they left. They never attempted to work with me or to address the challenges that my constituents faced. At that moment, I made a decision to actually leave the Minnesota Senate. That propelled me to create this company that I have now, which is PTR Associates. And in this company, I am now working only with organizations led by African American, Indigenous, Latino, Asian leaders who are working on environmental justice issues. I want to use all of these lessons that I've learned in my life, in this country, all of the connections that I have made, and you, the people that I meet along the way, to help them be successful in doing the work that they need to do to advance environmental justice. at the Capitol. What I see is that they are underrepresented, they are underfunded. To really bring to the attention of legislators the urgency of investing in these issues, investing in transit, addressing climate change, and addressing all of the problems that impact their communities every single day. I know that I'm running out of time, and you want this time to take some questions. I really thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you my experiences and to connect those experiences to the work that we need to do collectively, not only to protect our environment, but to open opportunities for people of color, indigenous people, immigrant people, and minorities in this state so that we can all thrive and collectively take care of each other and our planet. Thank you so much.
There are two of us who have microphones. We'll bring them to you if you have a question. And we also have somebody monitoring on the live stream. So if you put your questions in the chat, we'll try to pick those up too. So let's start. Who's the first? Oh, right over here. Good.
Thank you so much for your service to the state, and thank you for coming to speak with us today. I was wondering, could you paint a picture for us of the ideal transit system that for the state of Minnesota, that from your point of view, to serve the communities that you're focused on?
Thank you for that question. You know, I believe that an ideal transit system is a system that we use. And this is the greatest challenge that we have right now, that we're not using even the system that we have in place right now. There are challenges that we face right now in Minnesota just with the actually very small transit system that we have right now. People don't feel safe in our transit system right now. They don't feel safe in the light rail. They don't feel safe in the buses. So to me, an ideal system is a system that you will use no matter what. We have an opportunity right now. We have an aging population that really needs to use transit system, and they need to feel safe. So I think that that's where we need to start, that we need to start increasing the number of people who need to use transit. And then connectivity. I think that if we don't address, if you have to take an hour and a half to get from place to place, you're just not going to take the train or the bus because it takes too long. So there are some issues around expediency and also the safety aspects of using transit right now that we have to use. And I think that will increase the use of transit and therefore the demand, because it goes together. If there is no demand, I think the legislature just don't see the reason for investing in a system that doesn't have a demand. So for me, the ideal system is a system that you really begin to use, that you really demand, exist, and articulate how it will work best for you, in terms of time, efficiency, availability. And we only do that and make those investments if you actually get actively involved in it. Using it and demanding that it meets your needs, because then it will fit your needs, and it's kind of an evolution, a circular thing.
Thank you for coming. We're at the point in this session where omnibus bills were being negotiated. Where would you point us if we wanted to contact either our legislator or leadership on key committees? Where are the key decisions being made where our input might make a difference around environmental justice for the communities that you're representing? Where would you send us?
Thank you so much for that wonderful question. That's the best question when you have an audience like this. So one of the reasons I decided to form my company was a call that I got from Julia Nerbon from IPL, and she said, Patricia, would you be willing to do legislative affairs now that you're retiring from the Senate? And I said, well, I don't know. I have to get some contracts and be able to make a living. And she said, well, we have a very good agenda. We need $250 million for solar in the schools. We need $85 million to create a green bank, and we need to expand hemp, and we need about $25 million. And then she went on with her list, and I said, oh, okay, I'm in. Let's do it. But so now we're just really at a point where, we started with this very long list of priorities, and we are negotiating the end. So Patty Acom is the chair of the Energy Committee, and I would very much encourage you to support what Patty Acom is doing right now. I am so grateful for Patty Acom. So Patty Acom just proposed an amendment that is very bold, and I would like her to succeed. So we have $500 million that was set aside when they put the targets. And for people who may not be tracking this, the governor, the majority leader, and the speaker at the beginning of session kind of at the beginning of session, 3 weeks into that, they put targets for every committee, for transportation, for environment, for the health and human services. One of those targets was $500 million that nobody knew what it was for. So we've been asking, where is this target, 500 million? Where? 500 million is a lot. To give you a context, energy got 250 million. So 500 is double that, and we don't know what that money is for. So we finally figured out that this is kind of for a technology. Hopefully we will do, this new technology, transmission technology and chips that are made now in China, and Minnesota wants to be kind of the leading force on that. The problem is that we don't have that industry, so we will be creating, and we have 500 million kind of there. So Patty Acom is saying we need an amendment for 100 million out of that pot of money that will go into two pieces. One is called an innovation fund that will actually do a matching 100 million from the federal government out of the Inflation Reduction Act funding, and then 25 million she's going to add to this concept that we put in place, that it is the Climate Innovation Finance Authority, which is a green bank that will also leverage a lot of resources from the private sector. I would like to ask you to please support that, because that's about 150 million that will be available for grants in low-income communities in both rural and the rest of the state of Minnesota for projects that are not viable in the private market, because these energy projects need to be so big that it's hard for us to find the money. So this funding will be available to do clean energy projects in communities that are low income, and is a very, very important move. So I would like to ask you to please support the work that Patty Acom is doing right now. To be honest, the House is doing an exceptional job. I think the Senate is moving in that direction, but remember, it's hard to move when you only have one vote difference. It's a very difficult task for the Senate. But the House is leading our state in very good ways.
Patricia,
Yes.
as we look at the climate justice for immigrant and BIPOC communities, you focused on transportation. Now we've got this piece that will go there. Can you please name some of the other climate justice issues that are out there? I know I worked on air quality, because air quality was particularly hitting immigrant communities and BIPOC communities when I was in the legislature. But there are other issues, and we have little time, but I wonder if you can list some of the other ones that you are working on or will be working on that most affect women of color, BIPOC communities and immigrant communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. So there is there are several things, but there is an important coalition built by Environmental Justice Table that is working to close the HERC incinerator here in Minneapolis. We need your help with that advocacy. The work that we're doing in that respect has two parts to it. One, that we want to eliminate incineration, and we want to close the HERC. But at the same time, we want to put in place policies for zero waste. So we have a number of bills that are aimed at, for instance, increasing funding for recycling, increasing funding for composting, so that we don't produce so much garbage. The reason we're incinerating is because we produce so much garbage, and we don't have a system that is funded in order to really eliminate waste. So please support the work that Environmental Justice Table is doing. Nazir Khan is the director of that organization, doing amazing work with a very large coalition to move forward many bills that are in the zero waste category. At the same time, and I want you to please pay attention to this issue because it is an issue that is dividing our friends, dividing communities, and dividing networks that are very important for the future of really progressive policy in the environmental area. We have to measure the impact of pollution in low-income communities and in general. So Representative Fu Lee has a bill to measure the impact of pollution in environmental areas and is instructing the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency to actually measure these toxins and give us a sense of how they impact community. There are several bills related to that. Well, Labor has managed to convince some of our tribal groups that they should not be on board with that, and we have some senators and representatives that don't want these bills to apply to the mining communities up north. So now we have a very divided state where we have been asked to focus on pollution in the metropolitan area only. And we have people in North Minnesota who are saying, we want to know if these companies are polluting the air and the soil and the water. And we want the legislature to responsibly actually measure that. We want MPCA. Everybody wants that. But there are some lobbying groups that have been actually pushed to come and advocate against these policies because they think that we're going to eliminate jobs if we do that. So here we are in a place and a time where I believe that every Minnesotan wants to know whether their air is being polluted by a company, no matter who you are, because you need to know, being told that you actually don't need to know, because if you do know, you are going to make sure that that company is not in your community, and then jobs are gone. So that's a constant at the legislature, actually, you know, this issue that they divide and conquer, you know, that there is that we cannot go in a direction where we can create jobs that are actually good for the community, and that we need to protect these few jobs that are actually not very good for our communities and our state. So please pay attention to that, because it's one of the most divisive issues that are going on right now in terms of, you know, this job creation in certain communities and the protection of the environment. All right, I think my time is up. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, and sorry to end but there's a hard end on the live stream. But thank you, Patricia, for helping us to kick off our focus on environmental justice. And a big thank you to Adult Ed, Reverend Margaret Fox, Rocky Rockenstein, and Michael Gold in particular for collaborating on this forum. Next Sunday, we will welcome Westminster member Tim Nixon of Signal Analytics and Jessica Hellman from the University of Minnesota's Institute on the Environment, speaking on how 25 companies are the key to avoiding the worst effects of climate change. See you all next week.